Things are looking bright for Alabama following a successful official visit weekend, but there's one recruit we're keeping our eye on. Stick around. This is Way Offsides. Hey, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever the case may be. Cotton here with the Way Offsides crew. Welcome to your favorite Alabama sports talk, where we do everything the other guys do. We just do it a little different. Happy to have you in. We're going to talk about some recruiting today, as we have been a lot lately. Why are we talking about recruiting so much? Well, it's official visit season, and Alabama just wrapped up a very successful weekend. We think that in the long run, Alabama is going to make some ground with some folks here. We actually think that there may be a prediction on the way later this week's round. If you don't want to miss that, be sure you hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and you'll know exactly when we do it. You can also follow us over on our social, at Way Offsides. It's Way with 4 A's, never 3, never 5. 3's not enough, 5's too many. Way Offsides. Welcome in. You guys love talking recruiting. And as you know, recruiting is a lot different than it used to be. It's different for Alabama because Nick Saban isn't there anymore. It's different for everybody because of the transfer portal and NIL and how you have to recruit and strategize nowadays with your roster. You know, it's much more difficult to kind of stack talent like Alabama used to do 10 years ago. But it hasn't really stopped Kalen DeBoer since he got to Tuscaloosa. He finished with a top 3 class last year. He is going to be in contention for a number 1 class this year. He will probably finish in the top 3, 4, 5, somewhere in there, which is pretty astounding work when you consider, you know, that Nick Saban is no longer the head coach at Alabama. But there's one recruit that has been lighting up message boards and all over social media. Everybody's talking about him, and that is 5-star linebacker Xavier Griffin. Now, we late in May, God, it's already June. Wow. Late in May, we put in an official prediction for Alabama to land the 5-star linebacker. Now, I will be straightforward with you here. What's interesting about this is we have a group chat over on X where we talk a lot about recruiting. And in the chat, we were all talking, and there were some folks that were saying he's a lock. And I was saying, hold on, I want to wait till later in June to drop this prediction. I'm not ready to do it yet. And then literally while we're having the conversation, Steve Wiltfong over at On 3, notable recruiting analyst, drops a Fong bomb, which is his version of a whoop, on Griffin to land at Alabama after he decommitted from USC. So we were like, you know what, we're just going to go ahead and do it. But I did it with hesitancy, hence the 60% confidence. And I did that because although everybody seems really high on Griffin, he still had some big names in play, especially in terms of official visits. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Now, I'll let you know exactly what I think is going to happen with Griffin later on in the video. So be sure to stick around for the full thing because you don't want to miss that. But let's talk about what's going on with him right now. Griffin is I think he's either the number 1 linebacker. He might be the number 2 for some folks, depending on which recruiting agency you're looking at. But the 5-star linebacker is one of the best in his class. He, tops names like Sincere Johnson, things like that. I mean, just Griffin is a legitimate plug and play type guy. I think that this is a position that Alabama is in desperate need of this recruiting cycle. Griffin's family is a huge, they're big Alabama fans. And the rumor on the street is that he had originally committed to USC and then he decommitted because they didn't want him taking official visits anywhere else. That information is not verified. That just comes from message boards, people talking. But the Gainesville, Georgia linebacker is a target of many schools, but it seems like his top candidates are going to be Ohio State, Alabama, Texas, and Florida State. Florida State's interesting in that mix with those 3 big names, but what happens here remains to be seen. Now, Griffin is interesting because for a while during his initial recruitment before he committed to USC, a lot of people felt that he was going to be a Bama lock. Then the USC commitment happens, then the decommitment happens, and then you go right back to where you were in the first place. He's going to be a Bama lock, right? Well, that's a lot of people feel that way or felt that way. That was until this past weekend. Xavier Griffin took an official visit to Ohio State. You saw it all over social media, and this kind of made Alabama fans a little nervous. We know that Ohio State is a big NIL player. I will tell you, so are the other schools in contention for him. And I think Alabama is a big NIL player this season. But, Griffin was pretty verbal about his visit to Ohio State and how he truly enjoyed it. And Ohio State gave him a lot to think about, the normal jargon. But straight off of that visit, you start to get words from some of these insiders, these recruiting insiders who were discussing what they think could happen with Xavier Griffin. The loudest voice in the room was Chad Simmons over at On3, who pretty much said that he felt like, although Fongbaum had, or Fongbaum, whatever, Wilt Fong had placed a Fongbaum for Xavier Griffin and felt that Alabama was the leader in his recruitment, that Simmons was hearing from people that really it's a race between Ohio State and Texas. Now, there's a couple of ways you can look at this. You can take Simmons for his word. You can consider the introduction of bias. A lot of people feel like Chad Simmons is not a big fan of Alabama and has always kind of talked poorly about Alabama. If those of you who followed the recruitment of Caleb Downs initially, when he committed to Alabama, Chad Simmons had him forecast to a lot of other places, Ohio State being one of them, which he eventually wound up via the transfer portal when Nick Saban retired. But Simmons, the voices in the Alabama Twitter sphere feel like Chad Simmons isn't an unbiased opinion. That's one way you can look at it. You can also look at it as the information that Simmons is likely getting is from the camps at Ohio State, who, of course, are going to tell you that he had a great visit and that they feel like they're number one in his recruitment. What else are they going to say? It's coach speak. I didn't see anything going through the remarks that Xavier Griffin made himself regarding the visit to Ohio State. I don't see anything that doesn't sound like the typical fare that a recruit is going to say about a school. Obviously, you don't want to talk poorly about these places when they're paying money to have you come visit. And so I think Griffin handled it professionally. Now, does that mean that Ohio State didn't gain some footing in his recruitment? Absolutely not. They very well may have. But some other things that we have to consider about Xavier Griffin is he is not committed to Alabama. He is predicted to commit to Alabama, and that is a verbal commitment. Recruiting is more fluid now than it has ever been, and we've got a long way to go till signing, right? And so a lot of these guys could potentially stay with Bama or not. As well, we've got the Ohio State official visit out of the way. Next up is Alabama. Xavier Griffin will be at Alabama this weekend from June 6th to the 8th. You're going to hear a lot of the same jargon once he leaves Tuscaloosa, that it's, it felt really great. Alabama is top school, blah, blah, blah. You're going to hear a lot of that from him, from On3, and it's just because it's the typical thing to say. Now, the only way that I think Alabama fans could take a breath here is if he comes off that visit June 8th and says, I'm not taking any more visits anywhere else. This is it. I'm committing to Alabama. I don't think that's going to happen because he's going to commit on June 29th. So he's going to take his OVs. Following Alabama, he goes to Texas on the weekend of June 13th. That one is one that you should hold your breath for. Texas is going to make him an offer. Whether he refuses it or not is completely up in the air. But right after that following a couple days later, he will be in Tallahassee at Florida State for a couple of days for a visit there. So Alabama's not going to get the last visit from five-star linebacker Xavier Griffin. But my confidence is pretty strong for a couple of reasons. One being the fact that his family are huge Alabama fans. That's obviously their school of choice. That didn't seem to play into him committing elsewhere originally when he committed to USC. However, I did notice something yesterday. Jamari Matthews was on this is an Alabama commit, was on an official visit to Auburn and live streaming it on Instagram. This was during or after the Ohio State visit by Xavier Griffin. In the comment section, Griffin is posting elephant emojis. So take that as you will. I think he's probably still heavy on Alabama. Wilt Fong has addressed it earlier today that he feels like the school that's still leading is Alabama. Everything that he's been told leads him to believe that it's Alabama. Alabama's going to get a chance at him this weekend. They've got some other really good guys coming in. And with the way Alabama's using their players to help recruit, I think that'll be very impactful this weekend. Again, I expect him to take his other visits. I expect him to go to Texas. That's going to be the one that you go and hold your breath. Florida State, don't count them out. They're going to make an NIL offer as well. But it's just a little weird, I think, Florida State being in the mix with Ohio State, Alabama, and Texas for this guy. But, I mean, Florida State is an NIL school. So we'll see how it plays out in the long run. But before we go, let's take a look at our Whoop board. Right now, we have 4 players whooped way offsides of official predictions to commit or wind up signing with Alabama. Jordan Edmonds was the first one, and he indeed did verbally commit to Alabama. We're waiting on Xavier Crowell and Cedarian Morgan, both who have official visits coming up. And then obviously the guy we're talking about in this video, Xavier Griffin. Now there's some other guys I really want you guys to keep an eye on as we move forward. One of those is going to be KJ Ford, Trenton Henderson, a lot of interesting things going on. Nolan Wilson, a lot of interesting things going on behind the scenes. Now, I'm not saying Bama's going to get all of these guys. What I'm saying is that Bama has made a pretty favorable impression on them during their OVs. So tell me in the comments, what do you think? Do you think Griffin is an Alabama lock? Do you think that Bama has anything to worry about? Should Bama fans stop reading message boards? Is Chad Simmons a Bama hater? What do you think? Try to be unbiased with your opinions. I really want to hear what you have to say. But that's going to be it for today. We've got some more content coming. Be sure to stick around, subscribe, do all the things. We love each and every one of you. You are the best, for real. Say your prayers, read your Bibles, wash your hands. Horns down. Beat Auburn and LSU and Tennessee too. Roll Tide.